All right, I'm Steve Wood, recovered alcoholic. Welcome to the Great Reality Book Study. Uh, just making sure, yeah, it's recording. So, last week we looked at, you know, like the directions of step 10. We saw that step 10 is, basically, I'll mention it again tonight, probably is 4 to 9 in a single package. And we looked at the step 10 promises and saw that amazing promise in there that that the problem has been removed. They're talking about the obsession of blindness our whole life, may us drink and use against our will, is gone. And kind of makes the allergy kind of a mute point because it's no longer being fed. And tonight we'll look at why we need to continue doing this growth. And we see, and look at we're going to look how these two steps work together. And I always like this story. Is there's a story of Saint Francis, and he's out in the middle of this field, and he's just you know digging up some dirt, and a little kid comes by, and he goes, "What are you doing, Saint Francis?" And Saint Francis goes, "Oh, I'm gonna plant a garden." The little boy comes back, and a few days later, and he goes, he goes, "What are you put?" He goes, "What are you putting in?" And he goes, "What are those seeds?" He's all, "Well, some of these are zucchini, and some of these are corn, some of these are tomatoes. We have a big garden." And the next day, he comes by again, and he's covering with dirt. He explains to the boy the importance of covering with dirt. And then next day comes by, he's watering. He explains the water. And he comes by a few days later, and he goes, maybe a week later, and he sees the plant start to come about. And as the months go on, he finally comes up to St. Francis. He goes, "Man," he goes, "you got an amazing garden here." He goes, "What are you gonna do next?" And he goes, "Pick up the rake." He goes, "Now it's time to maintain this garden." And it's all about maintenance and growth of our spiritual experience. And you have to like look at it, if hypothetically, if the sun became obstructed, what would happen is, the world would slowly become dark. It would become a dead planet. And the same fashion, what happens when our spirit gets obstructed, we slowly fall into darkness and then insanity and death. And our obstructions are resentments and fears and guilt and sex misconduct, all stuff we inventory, all the stuff which blocks us to God, and it leads us to that illusion that we're separated from God. And what creates that obstruction, what creates you know, those obstructions is misdirected instincts. And we've been hammering it home for, I don't know, 4 months in here now. The book calls this inability to connect to God, um, because of the obstructions to spiritual malady. And Bill Wilson, you know, discovered or created simple, principles to remove that malady, 4 through 9. So once that obstruction is removed, spiritual conversion slowly starts to take place. It's also known as, it could be an awakening, could be slowly, could be boom, boom, be experience, spiritual experience. Um, and what happens is we experience consciousness of the spirit within, and that's where we take on, over time, we start taking on the characters of that spirit. That's called oneness of the wholeness. And that's, you know, within that restores the sanity. And, like I said, the obsession gets removed, but I got to maintain it. And it's interesting because, originally they had 6 steps they followed. And the 6 steps, really, they were all different everywhere, and it's different words and stuff. But the main thing was inventory, discussing with someone, making amends, prayer meditation, and sponsoring. And he came up with step 10, so we got continued spiritual growth. So with step 10, every moment is an opportunity to learn more about ourselves, about others, and keep growing. But the key to maintaining spiritual growth is that complete honesty, that rigorous honesty. And how do we, how does that same you know, I'm gonna do it the same way I did when I had the awakening. That's with inventory, the same way I did in step 4. But when I am a guiding light, to another through the steps, I don't want to make these steps more confusing, some type of learning curve by giving them some other type of inventory. Now we're adapting to this. This is a 10 step. I want it to be the smoothest, like not even a transition, it just slides into it. And I want them to write the stuff down the way they did in step 4 when things come up. But now they know to do inventory. They're onto it. So we continue to personal inventory. And I said last week, and I don't know how people can get past the word continue. If he wanted to be in a type of inventory, I think he would have mentioned in this book. But he simply says continue to take personal inventory. And step 10 is simply, condensed version of 14.9. But when things crop up, as he says it, not if they crop up, when they come up. And we're developing daily discipline by inventorying our thoughts and behaviors. And if so, I know what corrective measures, but I'm not doing doing the inventory part this week and the 5th step this week, and I'm doing boom, boom, boom. Because, at times we all have self-centered behaviors. And the book provides very specific instructions how to get rid of those behaviors. And how many times do we try other methods? Maybe with therapy, maybe whatever, but we must continue to do the things that removed it in the first place. If you go to, we're going to look in the 12 and 12, it's just one sentence, but it's on page 90. And I brought it up in step 4, and I'm going to bring it up now. And it's one sentence on page 90 of the 12 and 12. It says, it is a spiritual axiom that every time we are disturbed, no matter what the cause, there's something wrong with us. Right? Spiritual axiom. And, axiom means truth. The spiritual truth. When we're just now, see, you would have told us that in step 2, they would have been, oh, no, it's not true. But now we know that. I never truly understood that statement at all until I, started continuous inventory. I saw in step 4 that I was to blame for my resentments, fears, but I didn't quite understand inventory at that time. Then I started doing 10, and I wrote down little things. Then when the big things came up, I knew how to deal with them. A guy cut me off. Yeah, if it bothered me enough early on, I wrote it down. Someone didn't pay me back the money, I wrote it down. I discussed it with my sponsor. And just about everything I wrote down, because I started to see that every time I'm disturbed, there's something wrong with me. I realized the only thing could possibly wrong in this universe is my thinking, the way I perceive it. Step 10 lays the foundation of this, spiritual living the rest of our lives. And a big problem with people think, step 10 is something that we dust off when things go bad. They have this awakening and they only do inventory when fears and resentments pile up. And that's not what we're doing. They wait until the roof caves in. That's not what we're doing. We look as they crop up, when they crop up, write things down. So when the big things happen, you can deal with them and you can truly know what's going on when a big thing. It's like when you practice driving the first times and you go out with your parents and drive, and you're driving like a little real slow, and then you start driving yourself and you start going real slow. But over time, you get better at it, and because you took your time driving, you see everything in front of you. You know how to get out of the way. If you just jump behind the car and start driving fast, it doesn't work that way. So let's see what the book says here about problems piling upon us. And go to page 85. It says it is easy to let up on a spiritual program of action and rest on our laurels. So that's an old phrase. The origins of that phrase, rest on our laurels, it goes back to the ancient Greece and all back to the original Greek games, actually, which would eventually come to the Olympics. And it was a lot different than they did it every week. And the victor was crowned with a laurel wreath around his head. And the wreath, what it symbolized was the winner could not rest on his laurels. It was, if you wanted to remain champion, you must work even harder to continue to have continuous victory and continue to be champion. So to rest on laurels means be satisfied with the degree of victory, right? And Bill used the term rest on laurels because he witnessed members having spiritual conversions, a result of the 6 steps that they did, or just having some type of awakening, and then rest on their achievement. So when he would expand it from 6 to 12, Bill, being the advocate of inventory he was, he came up, with step 10 because he observed those people doing the 6 steps, having an awakening, thinking they have this and it's going to be everlasting, and instead they get miserable and they get drunk again. And he wanted it to be in writing. He called it a loophole step. He wanted to be in writing that this was our way of life. He wanted people to know that they needed to continue, not rest on their laurels, and if they wanted to have new spiritual freedom, they could continue to grow in that freedom. And it's your look back at 3 years ago, the way you looked at your relationship with God to this today, or 10 years ago, because it's the growth we put in. So all we need is to continue to forward tonight as a way of life, and by doing so, the awakening, it never fades, and the new spiritual freedom is ongoing, the daily freedom. And the fellowship here, people use the term, you hear a term they give newcomers, and they say, keep plugged in, keep coming to meetings, stick with the winners. And the term stay plugged in was actually started in AA in the mid-50s, and it meant stay plugged in. When they mention it, they're talking about step 10. That's what they meant, and it spilled over in the meetings. And I learned that was in New York from a guy. But we must live the steps. And step 10 is our insulin. It's what happens, when a certain person's diabetic, and they go out insulin. Let's go back to the book. So rest on our laurels is we are headed for trouble if we do so, for alcohol is a subtle foe. I don't know how subtle it is, but we are not cured of alcoholism. We are recovered. It's a difference. What we really have is a daily reprieve that's contingent on the maintenance and growth of our spiritual condition. I say growth in there, maintenance of our spiritual condition. So reprieve means relief. It's a very deep word. And it also means, you could say, to stay, but it means relief as well. And contingent means dependent upon. I'm dependent upon something. So it looks like what he's saying here is what we really have is daily relief that's dependent on the maintenance of our spiritual condition. So how do I maintain my spiritual condition? Step 10, by doing inventory, right? So we must do step 10 and grow so we can connect to God in 11. People don't do inventory, and then they also can't have the step 11 they once had. Let's go to page 98 and the 12 and 12. Page 98. We'll be going back and forth there maybe one more time tonight. Page 98, 12 and 12. This is another good one. There is direct linkage, not linkage among self-examination, meditation, and prayer. So direct linkage among inventory, but he said self-examination, that's all 4 through 9. There's, direct linkage between self-examination, meditation, and prayer. Taken separately, these practices can bring much relief and benefit. We know that. But when they're logically elated and interwoven, that's a powerful word, interwoven, the result is an unshakable foundation for life. So step 10 and 11 work together. It's the heart of our daily program. And tie in that daily program 12 also, or even making some of your old amends if you're in that place too. But 10 and 11 together, it involves taking personal inventory, discussing another, asking God to remove it, making amends quickly. All boom, boom. And thanks to that cleansing, I can have I can have a conscious contact with my higher power right away. Something gets in the way. And then can improve that conscious contact with the higher power by talking to the higher power in prayer and listening and stuff in meditation. But those two steps, along with the 12-step practice for the rest of our life, you know, it's not about remaining sober. It's about remaining awake. I mean, not sober is not important, but sober is just a small, my friend Derek would say, just a small little byproduct of this, a fingernail clipping, you know. I don't, when I get a resentment today and I get frustrated, I'm not worried about drinking. I'm worried about losing my connection to God. It's like cleaning the window. You know, if you can't see out the front window of your car, sometimes it's not just, all of us, what do we want to do? We want to run the wipers. And you start getting mad because it's not taking that stain. You don't realize the stain is inside the car. So you got to physically clean the window, you know? That was even worse when you're on drugs, but you get really tricked out. But you got to clean the window once in a while. Clean your glasses off. Can't see well. Oh, that's what it is. That's better. Clean them off. I stressed last week that step 10 was 4 to 9 in a single package. But so many times step 10, again, when it's mentioned at meetings, I don't like to say that a lot, but it's true. I get, bewildered and lost because they only mention it as some type of inventory. It's like they're describing kind of like a psychological exercise rather than deep spiritual growth. If I'm just doing inventory in step 10 and that's it, it's just behavior modification. I feel bad to feel good, so I can feel, so I'm going to do the inventory to feel good again. So I'm going to feel bad, feel good, feel bad, feel good. So what's behavior modification is when I'm trying to extinguish an undesired behavior. That's not step 10. It might be a teeny piece of when I write it down, but I'm going to discuss another, and it's all to go to God. Decrease a type of behavior that's not this program. I need to talk with my sponsor, let God remove it, make amends if needed. My goal is when I do inventory and talking with another is to always go to God, let God remove it. And what's happening then, I'm also bringing 11 in there at the same time, because whenever I talk to God, no matter where it's at, it's always 11 is always there. The stamp is on it now. It's all intertwined. It's the one thing I look at like this. It's like I got blinds in my room up here, and why do I open the blinds so I can see outside? Now, if the blinds represent the malady, right, all the resentments I have, and I do inventory, and I just open the blinds and discuss it with someone, and I don't look at the window and go, "Oh, thank you, light," and walk away. No, I open the blinds so I can talk to the light, talk to God. The same thing I do when I let stuff go. Let's go back to the book. Now he says something very important here in this next sentence. Every day, little time frame there means daily. Every day is a day we must carry God's vision, carry the vision of God into all our activities. That's easier said than done. Because if I have a resentment, it's kind of hard. If I'm in fear, maybe especially like financial fears that I had recently, I got to write down and look at it. Because I'm not carrying God into it. So every day is a day must carry God's vision into all our activities, not some. Remember, think about, I was thinking 7-step prayer, good and bad. So here's God's will prayer, I call it. How can I best serve thee? Thy will, not mine, be done. That was like my mantra I used to say when people acted crazy in front of me. Thy will, not mine, be done, I'd say early on. Because these are thoughts which must go with us constantly. I mean, it's every moment. We can exercise our willpower along this line all we wish. It is proper use of the will. So we can, that thought, God, how can I best serve thee? That for me is, I went to how can I serve myself to how can I serve thee? That's a shift right there. And I don't say thank you to God every day. I say, how can I serve thee? That's my way of saying thank you. I do, I'm constant gratitude. Thy will, not mine, be done. You know, but those thoughts must go with us all the time. And we exercise our willpower along that line. So it's our thinking is one with God thinking. Proper use of the will. Back to the book. Much has already been said about receiving strength, inspiration, and direction. So there's three things we pray for right there: strength, inspiration, direction. Right. But much has been said about receiving strength, inspiration, and direction from Him who has all knowledge and power. If we have carefully, here's a condition: if we carefully follow directions. Have I carefully followed directions, or am I? Oh, I like what that guy said over there, and this guy said over there. I mean, I'm talking about the book here. We begin to sense the flow of his spirit into us. That's just beautiful. That's an amazing promise right there. Remember when you felt that flow of his spirit into you? Could have been 6 and 7. Could have been we made amends. Could have been 2 years into your recovery when you just really got flying on these steps, or maybe even you're the fist of the first time. And why is that? To some extent, we become God conscious. We become God conscious, and we're now receiving strength, inspiration, guidance, and direction from that spirit within us, the great reality. So we begin to develop this vital sixth sense. But he goes, welcome to the sixth sense, but that must go further, and that means more action. So let's talk about this sixth sense. So we live in a three-dimensional world, and this three-dimensional world is observed through 5 senses. We have hearing, taste, touch, smell, sight. Most people, I would say that I'm going to say most people. I'll say the average person never knows anything outside those 5 senses. But, about those 5 senses, ask yourself: has your sight always been correct? Are you always correct what you see? Is your hearing always perfect? I thought we're hearing it, but is your hearing always perfect? You might hear the right thing. Your sense of smell always correct. You smell some good food. Are you always right 100%? You know what it is. No, it's not always correct. Your taste bud ever fooled you? Have you ever touched something but what your mind thought it was something different? So there's another sense that never fools us, never lets us down, and that's the sixth sense, which is God consciousness. Never, always correct. God consciousness is the awareness of the higher self, or God. So it's a part of our being that helps us exceed our animal instincts. All those instincts we went over with in step 4. I mean, they're going to follow those misdirected instincts, so I'm going to follow. I can't do both. I can't have 2 cores, meaning where they're driven by God or we're driven by those instincts, giving us the ability, when we follow God, make the same rational decisions. So within that capacity of God consciousness is we can surpass anything that's bothering us, hurting us, or perhaps even killing us. You feel thus the strength, to take on anything, hands on. But it gives you the power and ability to understand and know what's happening around you when you're logged into it. So in life, we have 3 physical dimensions. We got height, length, and width. We have 3 dimensions of time: past, present, future. And we have three mental dimensions: thought, perception, and feelings. And then we have this. I'm going to share the screen. We have what's called three dimensions of life. So the center, as you can see, is our self-will. There's the mental and emotions you see right here, and there's the physical world. The center, the self-will, is our misdirected instincts, pride, the self-esteem, the personal relations, high self-esteem, stuff like that. And so when people are agreeing with me and following my demands, my instincts are in harmony with others. I'm cool. So I'm going to be kind, considerate, patient, and generous, even modest and self-sacrificing, right? Our mental emotions at that time are stable. But what if our instincts are not in harmony with others? And if it affects our mental emotions. So when our instincts are running riot and we're not in harmony with others, we're egotistical, selfish, and dishonest. Collision of harms, resentments, fears, self-destruction, self-centeredness. That's a spiritual malady, always in collision with others. Here's what always in collision with others looks like: anger, fear, selfish, restless, irritable, discontent, hatred, jealousy, misery, depression. I got an obsession in there. Self-pity, guilt, resentment. That's what our world looks like when we rely on instincts rather than God. I start holding grudges against others, all because so these two are inward. This inward thinking goes even further out, or the instincts affect all these. And there's depression and all sorts of things. So what happens if this malady outward goes, that's inward at the present, goes outward into our physical world? When we live on instincts, our mental emotions affects our mental emotions, right? And we go out here to the physical world, right? What does that look like? Now, what does the physical world look like? I got significant others, I got friends, I got money, I got cars I might own or steal, I don't know. But I got coworkers, education, church, material things, shelter, jobs, law, sex, children, family, keep going on and on and on. You know? And the thing about it is, when we live on instincts and our mental emotions, we go out here to the physical world, all of a sudden we don't have the significant other anymore. We don't have friends anymore. Others don't want to be around us. Our money creates a lot of resentments and fears. A different way of looking at it. Oops. Oops. Wait, hold on. I'm going way ahead of myself. We lose our car, coworkers, educations. We're not going there. We're not going to church. Material things might be important to us, especially when we steal them. We lose our shelter. We lose our jobs. The law is after us. Sex is just you know nothing. Children are around us, and our family have left. So that's what instincts run riot look like. This is a spiritual malady. This is where we can stay in, and that's the path of destruction we can cause. Even more important, when we drink, the mental and emotions calm down us temporarily, but what is it? How does this is what it looks like when we're stone cold sober the next day. This is how we feel when we're in pain. Now let's see it through the eyes of the steps. So when the first 1, 2, and 3, we know what steps those are. I'm gonna make a decision to turn my life over to God. But it doesn't really happen until I take the action of 4 through 7. Remember what the mental emotions was like? Now I take the action of 4 through 7. Oh, that ring went, that ring, that barrier went away. But some of the things, look at all the things that were there, but some still remain. Oops. Even after 4 through 7, fear, hatred, not for everybody, depression, obsession is probably still there, and guilt, right? So what do I have to do? I got to do this. I got to take the action, knock on the next ring, and look at 4 through 9. I mean, 8 and 9. We need to go out and make amends. And then you notice the physical ring is gone. So when we fix our destructive physical world, not only is the stuff, it gets repaired. And you noticed everything went away. The fears and resentments, and not that we lost our children, we don't have to focus on that. God is running our lives now. But all that stuff, all this stuff we get back, right? And then look at what we're left this. We're left with God. But how do we get rid of the last ring, the last barrier? 10, 11, 12. So all does that, doing this stuff with the steps and everything like here, does that change in step 10? No, we might wake up one day and feel like that, but I got to take the action. I got to get right back into it. I want to be this, and I might have to go to the physical world and make some amends so I can be right back here, right? And be here. And that's the fourth dimension of existence. This is what this book is talking about. If doing the steps with God, this happens. Just what happens. And when we are in a state of God consciousness, harmony doesn't come from the physical world anymore. God harmonizes me. God harmonizes me. Is there anyone here that doesn't want that? I'm gonna take it one step further. This might be cuckoo a little bit, but look at it like this. Another way to look at it. I like the triangle because I explained this in the very beginning. It's a pyramid, hypothetically, and what makes a pyramid strong? Foundation built on foundation, built on foundation, built on foundation. Unity in step 11, service in step 12, 4 through 9, recovery. And that gives me the circle. Remember, the circle is infinity. There's no corners. It's always ongoing. It's always moving. Always moving. That's where it gets us. A lot of people believe in recovery, there's like these two houses. One is the mind thinking house, and the other one is my fourth dimension house. And they'll say things like, when things go wrong in the mind thinking house, they think I just need to go over to the fourth dimension house and chill out. And they call that the pink cloud. That's why the pink cloud goes away, because there's only one house, the fourth dimension house. And we do 10, 11, 12 to have peace, and that endless pink cloud never goes away. 10, 11, 12 is that fourth dimension house. I can be there. I can always recreate everything that's happened. I can go right back and, let's say I go through a divorce and I got all this stuff that just comes back on me. I'm not drinking, but I can recreate everything that happened all the time. I can always recreate it, always recreate it. That's the beauty of it. That's the beauty of it. The book, says common sense becomes uncommon sense. It means our new common sense is no longer common with a 5-dimensional person. I mean, a 5-sense person, let's say, person with 5 senses. So does that mean we look at them down at people? No, we just give them the example that they need to see. And we do that by, discover the intuition or something that's just God consciousness. You can feel, you can see, feel, and smell and touch and all that stuff with those spiritual senses. So I never question. I try not to question his messages, even though it will sometimes. But use that inner, sense to recognize that there's infinite possibilities all around you. You know, it will guide you to where exactly where you need to be, or synchronicity. If someone shows up, like we in a park thinking about Rob, and he calls me. You know, that's all part of this fourth dimension thing. But it takes you to spiritual roads you're not accustomed to. That's awesome. And part of the, you know, for me, the heaviest item in my room sometimes is the pen. This pen gets really heavy sometimes because I want to figure it out. I want to figure it out. I don't know where I put it, but I have a whole inventory sheet I filled out the other day from fears, and for 3 days, this pen was super heavy, you know. Um, I need to show me how to live. God, not the pen. But the last sentence on the previous paragraph 85, we begin to develop this vital sixth step. We must go further than me from our action. And so now we enter another step. And we're not going to get into this week into the daily reprieve or the 24-hour plan, but we're going to talk about this step a little bit. So it says thought to prayer and meditation to improve. That means if I'm improving something, I already got it, right? To improve our conscious contact with God as we understood him. Praying only for the knowledge of his will, only for the knowledge of his will for us, and the power to carry that out. So not praying for the Ferrari and all that stuff. So sought, that would be, I'm going to close this down. I can stay on it. Sought is an action word, which means seeking something, right? Remember, we're seeking to have conscious contact with God. If I'm conscious of something, I gain a deeper understanding of that. If I have conscious contact with God, I'm always going to gain a new understanding. And the meditation part, the simplest aspect is listening. And next we'll talk about the two-way prayer and all that, but it's like an extended period of silent thought, concentration in order to comprehend intuitive messages, emptying myself to be one with God. So a lot of people, when they meditate, struggle with emptying their mind. What we have, luckily, is step 10 that will get us on that path. Prayer, talking to God, communication with God, communion with God. Asking for guidance, strength, inspiration, direction. How can I serve others? Always praying for others. And like I said, the word improvement, it means to make better. So we don't want to be like, think this is everlasting. We don't want to be gratified with a certain, what made me spiritual the other day by going over that inventory and sitting 45 minutes by myself to let it go. It's not where I'm keeping me where I'm spiritual right now. It's what I did today. Because I want to improve this. Praying only for his will for us. His will must always come before ours. Praying for information, guidance. Remember, my friend always used to say, remember 411 information? I don't know if they still have that or not, but it's 411 prayer, not 911 prayer. A lot of people want to do 911 prayer. We're not here to do 911 prayer. It might happen sometimes. 411 prayer, but if we're praying for someone who's ill, it might be 911 prayer, but power carried out. Now we have the power to carry it out. The step 11, it creates this amazing foundation, solid foundation that we need to stand on the rest of our lives. And I have I have a remember, our original foundation is that I'm admitting I'm powerless, that there's no lurking notion that 100%, that's my original foundation. But then I'm building on that foundation, and I'm building more on it. It's always going. Daily spiritual practice. I get awakened to consciousness. I have an opportunity to deepen my conscious to contact and meditation and prayer every day. I'm going to worship God. And I felt alone my whole life because of that, relationship. Because of the relationship with God, I never had to feel alone ever again. Remember what the fifth step promise says? Now you can be alone, perfect peace and ease. You can be alone and be by yourself and not, you can be alone and never be by yourself ever again. We're never were alone to begin with. It's the malady that created that aloneness, the separation. And when I started step 11, it wasn't difficult for me to improve my conscious contact with God through meditation and prayer. It just did. It wasn't like I looked at it and went, I just did it. I started, with basic stuff and grew into it. But a relationship with God does not just happen. You have to put time into it. How do you get to know someone? You spend time with them, right? How can you experience them? You know, you get to know them more. I mean, I could go hang out with Ali and for 10 days and come back and probably tell you most of the things about him, what he does every day, where he's from, all this stuff. So you get to know him. Now put God in that situation. That's all we're doing is step 11. And like any good relationship, that when you have a successful relationship, what do you want to do? You want to nurture it. You want to grow with it. You want to expand it. And the principle of commitment plays an important role in step 11 because it's all about repetition. You know, you think about things that are a way of life, right? Eating, sleeping, waking up, getting dressed. I should throw showering in there, I guess. But it took me around 3 months of constantly practicing meditation and prayer that it became a way of life. Meditation has been a part of my life for 24 years. I start off with the simple big book stuff, and then my questions I'll talk more next week, but my questions expand to where I got into more silent meditation and studied numerous, study is a big part of my life. That's a part of step 11. I got a lot of books I've read, but sure, I read, books on it and listened to audio recordings and went to classes, but it was the daily practice that made it work for me. And what happens when you make it a way of life, the love oozes out of you, and that's what happens. And the cool thing with step 11, even if, you know, I always, like my grandsponsor said, even an atheist can connect with love. And, and the thing about it is, he used to always say, if you squeeze an orange, apple juice doesn't come out, orange juice comes out. But if you squeeze an angry person, what comes out? Anger. You squeeze a loving person, what comes out? Love. Fermentation it was very important in the daily reprieve of the Oxer Group. The early members, well, for Dr. Bob and the good old timers, it's on 136. I don't know if you have it in front of you, but I'll always read it. It's pretty short. This is what Dr. Bob said. Receiving direct guidance from God through practice of quiet time formed the heart of the Oxer Group practices. Early AA members believed quiet time to be absolutely indispensable for staying sober. AA members of that time did not consider meetings a necessity to maintain sobriety. They were simply desirable. Let me read that one more time. This is Dr. Bob. AA members of that time did not consider meetings necessary to remain sobriety. They were simply desirable. Morning devotion and quiet time, however, were a must. So meetings were not the most, important thing about, staying sober. It was, they really pushed it. There's another thing from Dr. Bob and the Gold Timers. It says Dr. Bob's morning devotion consisted of short prayer, a 20-minute study of familiar verse from the Bible, and a quiet period of waiting for directions. So Oxer Group, we're big into early morning quiet time, at morning and at night. And the fourth principle from that they follow, one of the many principles, was listening for God's guidance and carrying it out. And early morning quiet time. And they looked at four elements of that: study, prayer, listening for God's voice, meditation, and journalizing thoughts. I've gotten the journalizing to time to time. But they had 10 fundamental points. I always find these interesting from the Oxer Group. God is alive. God knows. God will help. God can do anything. God is power. God is within. God is interested in you. God has a plan for you. God can answer for every need and problem you face. And the last one is anyone can be in touch with God. And then they had conditions for meditation. Take time. And I mentioned that. Take time. Be patient with it. Be quiet and still. Relax. Tune in. Listen. Be honest with every thought that comes. Open your heart. Write down everything that comes to mind. I can't remember what I got that from, but it was from it was a guy who was more of a current member of the Oxer Group, and he was talking about on a recording I had, and he talked about that stuff. But the thing is one of my friends uses the example of taking time of meditation is in Japan, the bamboo tree. It's very unique because it grows 80 feet tall. But you plant the seeds and you water it with that for 6 years with the promise you're gonna have a tree. But you have to remember that. Well, and all of a sudden, 6 weeks, like within weeks, it's 80 feet tall. What's it doing for those six years? It's growing its roots 10 feet down to the ground and more, and then it comes out. None of those trees would survive if people weren't patient with it. One of my favorite things from the Oxford Group is this, and it's one of the book, but it's I've expanded this to using this is exactly from that book, but what I bring this to my sponsees. If you're not receiving guidance or not getting any definite, it's because you're being blocked from God in some way. It's always one of these. These are powerful. There's something I will not do. There's something wrong in my life I will not face. There's something I will not let go of with fear or resentment. There's an amends I will not make. And there says restitution. There is a habit I will not give up. There's a person I will not forgive. It's pretty powerful. This is one that you tell us a person in recovery and they get mad. There's a relationship in my life I will not give up on. Holding on to that relationship to think it's going to work. You're saying if you have any of those, it's going to step in between you and God. If you, I like always to explain God with the word abiding. Like abide by the rules and obey the rules, but it's not about obey. It's deeper than that. It means to continue a particular condition. Abide means attitude. Continue relationship in a healthy one. Without stopping or yielding, continue something. So abide means to obey God's will and live one with God. It's not what we want anymore. It's what God wants for us. And like the Christians say about abiding, they say God is the grapevine and we are the branches. The branches cannot bear fruit itself. They must abide in the vine. Abide in me and I abide in you. Buddhists use the aspect of abiding is abide in the true self, and not the ego. And the Tao, which I love, the Tao, says, abide in the peace that flows through you. Follow the peace, abide in that peace. There's nothing like abiding in that peace of meditation. It may not be every day when you meditate, but some days you get there and you feel it. I mean, and the essence is we are all on a quest to know God, not knowing about God or believing in God, knowing God. Do you know how to ride a bicycle by staring at the bicycle? You know how to ride a bicycle and making conscious contact with the bicycle. And you get better by writing it every day. You know how to, you know, you know, how do you know God? Is by making conscious contact with God every day and knowing or staying in conscious contact with God by talking and listening every day. That's why it says God could and would if he were sought. You know, every person, and there'll leave many of us out, I mean, who has honestly tried to find that power in some way, it's an endless adventure. Every day is a new discovery. And why is that? Because we're hardwired to depend upon something. I say God. We're not hardwired to depend on each other or anything. When we are in, my friend used to say something very powerful. If you stood in a room, a crowd, and stood up on a table, would you trust if you fell off, you know, if you walked on top of a ladder and fell backwards, would you trust that someone in that room is going to run up and catch you? But what if, he always used to say this, is kind of going out there, but he used to say, imagine if there was someone in that room that was, his job was to follow you around and always catch you, always be there with you. That's God. You know, relationship with God, because it nourishes us in our relationships. So, in other words, through our relationship with God, we can truly have a relationship with others. So, without a relationship with God, and relationship with others is everything else is weak. Um, I look at all the challenges I've ever had leads to spiritual growth, especially today. And I know the commitment reputation of step 10. I've learned that, you know, we can all take responsibility for mistakes. And within growth, your God conscience expands, and not just one direction, every direction. Your talents become lit up, and you find yourself in a, you know, new exciting world. And yeah, every day's a new discovery. You know, better than any dream you ever had. So we need this intuition that only God conscious can give us. And I said this before last week. It means precisely as it sounds, intuition inside of us, you know, and inner resource, infinite possibilities. You know, it blesses you with more powerful energy and emotions, you know, than having to rely on your emotions. And you know, these inner messages stand apart from our thoughts because rather than trying to control them, they liberate you. And it's, you know, and that's the thing is it's all a gift. You know, I mean, hearing, feeling, and seeing through our spiritual senses molds who we can be today. So I always tell people is let your intuition take you on spiritual roads you're not accustomed to. Don't step back and go, oh, well, what if? And you know, never question messages. And it will take you exactly where you need to be. It will take you to those who need you, and will show you how to live and flow. And you will notice, like I'm gonna quote my friend Derek, you can learn to live life effortlessly. And I'm going to close with a story. Some of you have heard this before. It's called Touch of the Master's Hand. It was battered and sacred, and the auctioneer thought it was scarcely worth his while to bring up this old broken down violin. But he held it up with a smile. It was broken, the strings are broken on it and everything. Who will start the bidding for this old broken down violin? How about 10 cents? 25 cents? How about $1? Two? $2? Anyone want to buy this? All right, I'll just give it away. And some guy stands up from the back of the room. Mysterious figure, a gray old man came forward and he picked up the bow, tightens the strings, dwiddles on it for a minute, and then he picks up the bow, wiping the dust off of it, and he plays a melody so sweet, it's like angels singing, and the room is just blown away. With his voice now quiet and low, the auctioneer says, "What do I bid for this old violin?" And he held the violin bow. Someone says, he goes, $100. Someone, $1,000. Who will make it two? $2,000. Who will make it three? $3,000 going once, going twice, he said. The people cheered loudly as he cried out more money. And finally someone bought it for $5,000. One guy gets angry, yells out, "What's going on here? A minute, it was worth nothing. What changed its worth?" The touch of the master's hand did change the worth. Many men who live life out of tune, battered and scared with guilt and sin, is auctioned off to a thoughtless crowd like the old violin. He's going once, going twice, going almost gone. But the master comes and the foolish crowds never understands the worth of his soul and the change that's brought by one touch of the master's hand. That was my little tribute to Mark Houston. He told that story very well. I'm going to stop the recording right here.